I wish also to welcome esteemed delegations, intergovernmental organizations, and civil society for their participation in this special meeting. Our special appreciation goes to Reverend Dr. Peter E. Makari, who is joining us today as a civil society representative. Please note that this meeting is being webcast live on UN Web TV with simultaneous interpretations in all 6 official languages. I would like to urge all speakers to keep their statements within 5 minutes. Allow me to inform you that some of the dignitaries might have to leave the meeting at the end of the first segment due to other commitments. Before we proceed, I would like to make an appeal to those organizations who are registered to speak to please submit their statements for interpretations now. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me at this point to make a statement on behalf of the committee. Today, amidst the backdrop of devastation inflicted upon the Palestinian people, especially in the Gaza Strip, we once more gather on this solemn occasion to commemorate the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people in line with the General Assembly Resolution 32/40B adopted on 2nd December 1977. Regrettably, despite the committee's persistent calls for action to justly resolve the Palestine question, 76 years have now lapsed since the adoption of General Assembly Resolution 181 Roman II, which called for the partition of Palestine into 2 states. Palestinians continue to endure decades of systematic violations of their inalienable human rights, including to self-determination and refugee return. Spanning over 56 years of illegal belligerent occupation, Palestinians have suffered from relentless forced displacement, threats of forcible transfer, confiscation of and destruction of their land and property, collective punishment, including military blockade and the arbitrary detention of thousands. Since early October, Israel, the occupying power, has launched upon Gaza a deadly destructive war, killing over 14,000 Palestinians, mostly children and women, injuring more than 33,000 and forcibly displacing more than 1.7 million people. Our deepest condolences go out to everyone who is grieving the loss of their loved ones. The current situation in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, underscores the importance of today's commemoration. We must renew our resolve to assist the Palestinian people to attain their inalienable rights, including to live in dignity and freedom in the independent state of Palestine, with East Jerusalem as its capital, side by side with the state of Israel, based on the pre-1967 borders in accordance with the relevant United Nations resolutions. Ladies and gentlemen, earlier this year we commemorated the 75th anniversary of the Nakba, the catastrophic displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their homes and lands, and to where they are still unable to return. It was a sober reminder of Palestinian people's struggle to maintain their dignity and memory despite all odds. Israel continues to inflict the Nakba in the occupied Palestinian territory by forcing Palestinians from their homes and lands, by expanding illegal settlements, and transferring its own population to the occupied territory, in glaring contravention of international humanitarian law. Today, in relation to the war in Gaza, this ongoing Nakba is openly discussed by officials from Israel and visible on our screens in all its shocking details. Israel's war in Gaza and the humanitarian catastrophe it has caused are of paramount concern. Their implications extend beyond the region and require the immediate and collective action of the international community. There must be a full and sustained ceasefire, an end to any attempt to forcibly transfer Palestinian civilians from Gaza, and unimpeded and urgent humanitarian assistance to meet the massive needs of the population. The siege of Gaza, including over 16 years of Israeli blockade, must end. Israel must cease its settlement and wall expansion, displacement, and dispossession of Palestinian civilians through seizure of their properties and demolitions of their homes in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Israel's violations of international law must stop. We need a firm commitment to accountability across all spheres and an end to Israel's impunity. We cannot and must not remain passive witnesses to these ongoing crimes. The international community must rally behind the Palestinian people, offering genuine solidarity and urgent political, humanitarian, and financial support. We must stand up in defense of UNRWA's crucial role, a lifeline for millions of refugees, financially, morally, and politically. We must rededicate our efforts to resolve this conflict. We must recommit to usher the independence of the State of Palestine as called for by international law and countless UN resolutions. Ladies and gentlemen, let us view this solemn commemoration as a call to action for renewed hope. Let us forge a decisive path towards ending the Israeli occupation that began in 1967 and achieving a just and lasting peace between Israel and the State of Palestine, of which East Jerusalem and Gaza are and must remain an integral part, and securing the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. This will serve as the strongest foundation for peace and security in the Middle East and beyond. I thank you. It is also my honor and pleasure to welcome Mr. Dennis Francis, President of the General Assembly. I now have the honor of giving the floor to the President of the General Assembly, His Excellency, Mr. Dennis Francis.
His Excellency Ahmad Faisal Mohammed, Vice Chair of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People, Her Excellency Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General, His Excellency Zhang Jun, President of the Security Council, His Excellency Riyad Mansour, Permanent Observer of the State of Palestine, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests. Today we convoke here in New York and in Geneva, Nairobi, as well in other places around the world, to observe the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, an annual commemoration that reflects our steadfast commitment to unify around the cause of Palestine. This year, we mark this occasion against the unfortunate backdrop of a somber horizon, tinged by the extant constraints for peace and recognizing the profound challenges faced by the people of the State of Palestine. Challenges that have persisted for too long, despite decades of successive UN resolutions and countless diplomatic efforts aimed at achieving a just and lasting solution. Indeed, 75 years ago, the situation in the Middle East marked the first significant crisis for the newly established United Nations. The situation not only remains unresolved, but it is deteriorating before our very eyes at an alarming rate, with innocent civilians, especially women, children, and the elderly, bearing the brunt of drawn-out violence, deprivation, and uncertainty. Therefore, today, we are here to stand in firm solidarity with the Palestinian people, commemorating this day, albeit with heavy hearts, for the lives lost, both in the past 7 weeks and over the past 7 decades. Our deepest condolences go to the families who have lost relatives in this grievous conflict. Excellencies, the Palestinian people, particularly those in the Gaza Strip and all affected areas, live in extremely complex humanitarian conditions that demand both our attention and an immediate action. Let us be crystal clear. The Palestinian people, as all human beings, are entitled to their fundamental and inalienable right to live in dignity, with all liberties, freedom of movement, freedom from fear and from any want, and with unfettered access to basic services. It is therefore imperative that we restore and sustain their hope, especially among the younger generations that have never experienced what peace looks or feels like. By doing so, we will have fulfilled our duty of care in reaffirming the fundamental principle that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Thus, upholding these basic tenets is key to fostering a just, sustainable, and peaceful future for all Palestinian people. But for us to ensure that every Palestinian sees these inalienable rights as realized and respected, first and foremost, we need permanent peace in the Middle East. Second, we need to re-engage in dialogue in good faith, building trust, while adhering to the relevant UN resolutions and international instruments. We know much too well that insecurity and violence thrive in an atmosphere of tragedy and despair, that violence begets violence. Dear colleagues and friends, as we reiterate the General Assembly's undiminished call for peace, we too must advocate for open channels of communication, accompanied by robust support from the international community, leading to the two-state solution as the only viable option for lasting peace in the Middle East. With this, I welcome the ongoing diplomatic efforts to de-escalate tensions, and I support all efforts to mobilize UN capacities to implement this truce and maximize its positive impact on the humanity. humanitarian situation in Gaza. These days of respite from hostilities must be optimized to alleviate the dire needs of Palestinians, allowing them to mourn their dead, to have unhindered access to food and water, as well as other urgently needed services. In the past weeks, I have been very clear on the most critically needed steps now to bring an end to violence and needless suffering. Ultimately, our role is to devise and to encourage and press for implementation of long-term solutions. We, the United Nations, cannot lose sight of one of the ultimate and primary goals that brought our organization into being, which is, of course, peace for all. We should repeat that. Peace for all. I therefore appeal in earnest to the international community to leverage its power to seek compromise, direct dialogue, while fostering trust and good faith negotiations in the Middle East. The General Assembly has expressed itself on the current situation. Let us implement the peace it has repeatedly called for. Excellencies, dear colleagues, in closing, once again, let me express my deep appreciation to the dedicated UNRWA staff and other humanitarian workers who are working tirelessly to save lives in grave and untenable conditions, and extend my deepest condolences to the families of those who lost their lives in the pursuit of this noble cause. In our reflection today, let us remember the words of Palestinian author and lawyer Raja Shehadeh, that, and I quote, "In the pursuit of peace, we must recognize the shared aspirations for security and dignity that bind Israelis and Palestinians. It's a journey that demands mutual respect and acknowledgement of each other's narratives. Together, let us strive for a future where the aspirations of the Palestinian people are realized within the framework of justice, equality, and the respect of their inalienable rights as human beings, no different from others. I express my gratitude to you all. Let us stand united in these difficult times. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Dennis Francis for his important statement. Our committee is thankful for your stewardship of the Assembly in addressing the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory, including through the 27 October resolution during the 10th Emergency Special Session. I now have the honor of giving the floor to His Excellency Mr. Zhang Jun, Permanent Representative of China, in his capacity as the President of the Security Council. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. Chairperson, Excellencies, dear colleagues, this year marks the 30th anniversary of the commencement of the Oslo process, which reminds us that a just, lasting, and comprehensive solution in accordance with international law and the relevant UN resolutions to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict can only be achieved by peaceful means. This support of the international community has been and will continue to be crucial in this regard. During the past year, the Security Council has remained seized of the situation in the Middle East, including the Palestinian question. The Council received reports, briefings from the Secretary General, his special coordinator, and the relevant UN agencies and the departments on a regular basis, and convened discussions accordingly. The Council convened additional meetings in response to concerning developments on the grounds. On February the 20th, the Council adopted a presidential statement regarding Israel's announcement of further construction and expansion of settlements, as well as the legalization of settlement outposts, expressed its opposition to all unilateral measures that impede peace, including Israeli settlement activities, which are dangerously imperiling the viability of the 1967 lines, and reaffirmed its unwavering commitment to the vision of the two-state solution. Mr. Chairperson, this year's observance of the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people comes at a tumultuous time for Palestinians, Israelis, and the region. The Council has been closely monitoring the latest round of Israel-Palestine crisis that began on October the 7th. On November the 15th, the Council adopted Resolution 2712, the first resolution of the Council on Palestinian-Israeli issue since 2016. Today, the Council will hold a high-level meeting, and the Secretary General will report on the implementation of this resolution. The status quo is not sustainable, and the significant steps to reverse negative trends on the ground are urgently needed. As stated in Resolution 2712, the Council demands that all parties comply with their obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law, notably with regard to the protection of civilians, especially children. It rejects forced displacement of the civilian population. It calls for urgent and extended humanitarian pauses and corridors throughout the Gaza Strip for a sufficient number of days to enable the full, rapid, safe, and unhindered humanitarian access to facilitate inter alia the continuous, sufficient, and unhindered provision of essential goods and services important to the well-being of civilians, especially children, throughout the Gaza Strip. It also calls for the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. It calls on all parties to refrain from depriving the civilian population in the Gaza Strip of basic services and humanitarian assistance indispensable to their survival, and underscores the importance of coordination, humanitarian notification, and the deconfliction mechanisms. The Council will take the implementation of this resolution as a matter of prime concern. Mr. Chairperson, the Security Council remains fully committed to pursuing a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East, in line with international law, in particular with the United Nations Charter, international human rights law, and international humanitarian law, and consistent with its relevant resolutions, which represent a cornerstone of the peace and security in the region. This should be achieved throughout a credible political process to negotiate final status issues between the parties, leading to achieving a two-state solution where two democratic states, Israel and a sovereign and independent Palestine, live side by side in peace within secure and recognized borders in line with international law and the relevant UN resolutions, as well as taking into account internationally agreed parameters. Council members call for an immediate end to actions which undermine the trust between the parties and threaten the viability of a two-state solution. This includes settlement construction, demolition, and confiscation of Palestinian property and evictions of Palestinians and settlers, attacks across the occupied Palestinian territory, incitement to violence and terrorism. Members of the Security Council condemn violence and indiscriminate attacks against the civilians, both Israeli and Palestinian, and stress the importance of ensuring protection of civilians. Council members encourage progress towards intra-Palestinian reconciliation and the effective functioning of the Palestinian Authority, including in the Gaza Strip. Moreover, the Security Council continues to carefully monitor the acute fiscal and financial situation faced by the Palestinian Authority and stresses the importance of addressing this situation, including providing support to efforts undertaken to strengthen these institutions. The members of the Security Council also recognize the essential role that UNRWA plays, thanks to the lifeline support and the provision of services for millions of refugees in the region, as well as for Palestinians, civilians in the Gaza Strip, where the humanitarian disaster is worsening by the day. Similarly, Council members note with great concern the recurrent funding crisis of the agency and thank donors for the timely contributions while inviting others to contribute as well. Mr. Chairperson, the Security Council will continue to follow closely the situation in the Middle East, including the Palestinian question, to pursue the implementation of its relevant resolutions and foster and support efforts towards an environment conducive to achieving peace, prosperity, and security for both Palestinian and Israeli people. I thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Zhang Jun, President of the Security Council, for his important words, and also the recent Security Council resolution on Gaza under their presidency. The committee highly appreciates China's long-standing and unwavering support for the realization of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. Your Excellency, thank you very much. I now have the honor to give the floor to Deputy Secretary General Amina J. Mohammed on behalf of the Secretary General.
Thank you. Excellencies, President of the General Assembly, Chair, President of the Security Council, and the representative of the State of Palestine, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. This year's International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people is commemorated at a time of tragic loss and devastation. It is truly hard to grasp the killing of over 4,000 children in 52 days, and this must stop. As we mark this annual occasion for the 45th time, we must reflect on our collective failure to realize the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people and enable them to live in peace and dignity. For the past 6 days, the guns have fallen silent. We have seen the release of Israeli and foreign hostages held by Hamas and others since 7th of October, and the release of Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails. This is a glimmer of hope in the darkness. The dialogue that led to this agreement must continue, leading to a full humanitarian ceasefire. I now have the honor to deliver the Secretary General's message. This International Day of Solidarity comes during one of the darkest chapters in the history of the Palestinian people. I am horrified by the death and destruction that have engulfed the region, which is overwhelmed with pain, anguish, and heartache. Palestinians in Gaza are suffering a humanitarian catastrophe. Almost 1.7 million people have been forced from their homes, but nowhere is safe. Meanwhile, the situation in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, risks boiling over. I express my sincere condolences to the thousands of families who are mourning loved ones. This includes members of our own United Nations family killed in Gaza, representing the largest loss of personnel in the history of our organization. I have been clear in my condemnation of the terror attacks by Hamas on 7th of October, but I have also been clear that they cannot justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. Across the region, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency is an indispensable lifeline, delivering vital support to millions of Palestinian refugees. It is more important than ever that the international community stands with UNRWA as a source of support for the Palestinian people. Above all, this is a day for reaffirming international solidarity with the Palestinian people and their right to live in peace and dignity. That must start with a long-term humanitarian ceasefire, unrestricted access for life-saving aid, the release of all hostages, the protection of civilians, and end to violations of international humanitarian law. We must be united in demanding an end to the occupation and the blockade of Gaza. It is long past time to move in a determined, irreversible way towards a two-state solution on the basis of United Nations resolutions and international law, with Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security, with Jerusalem as the capital of both states. The United Nations will not waver in its commitment to the Palestinian people. Today and every day, let us stand in solidarity with the aspirations of the Palestinian people to achieve their inalienable rights and build a future of peace, justice, security, and dignity for all. Thank you.
I wish to thank the Deputy Secretary General for his statement. I would also like to express the committee's sincere appreciation for the efforts of the Secretary General aimed at advancing the two-state solution as a comprehensive, just, and lasting settlement of the question of Palestine. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Riyad Mansour, Permanent Observer of the State of Palestine to the United Nations, who will read out a message from His Excellency Mr. Mahmoud Abbas, President of the State of Palestine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have the honor to read the statement of His Excellency Mahmoud Abbas, President of the State of Palestine, on this important occasion of the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. Maali Al-Sayyid Antonio Guterres,
Your Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations. His Excellency, Mr. Dennis Francis, President of the General Assembly. His Excellency, Mr. Zhang Chun, President of the Security Council. His Excellency, Mr. Sheikh Niang, Chair of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in this most difficult time that the Palestinian cause is going through, and in these darkest of times, the light of hope shines from the principled position of the peoples who have risen up in all corners of the globe to express their solidarity with the Palestinian people, their struggle and their legitimate rights to freedom, independence, and return, and to condemn the aggression, the war, the killing, the destruction, the displacement. They have risen to stand by the right side of the history. Today, in my name and on behalf of the Palestinian people, I extend my gratitude and appreciation to these peoples and their leaders, those who echoed the voices and positions of their peoples, and to all those who believe in the fairness of the Palestinian question and in the inalienable right of our people to life, to freedom, and to self-determination. I also extend thanks to all countries, organizations, peoples who have risen to provide humanitarian aid to our people. We tell you, we will not forget this generosity and these noble gestures. We have been inspired by your sincere dedication, your humanity, and your principled positions in support of fundamental rights, international law, and in rejection of occupation, aggression, and apartheid. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people comes at a time where our people in the Gaza Strip are facing an existential threat and the deliberate and systematic targeting of civilians. Since the 7th of October, the Israeli occupying forces have committed horrific international crimes, including war crimes and crimes against humanity. They have launched a barbaric aggression, a despicable war of vengeance, and crimes of genocide. They are targeting innocent people. The victims of this Israeli aggression have reached more than 60,000 Palestinians killed and injured thus far, 70% of whom are children, women, and elderly. In addition to thousands of victims who remain under the rubble, entire families have been exterminated, and more than 1.7 million Palestinians have been displaced in a blatant attempt to impose a new Nakba. Tens of thousands of homes, buildings, facilities, shelter centers, and infrastructure have been destroyed on the top of the heads of their residents by the Israeli war machine. This war is an extension of the constant aggression of this occupation against our people, an attempt to perpetuate and entrench its colonization and occupation of the territory of the State of Palestine, including Jerusalem. But we should all know by now, peace and security can never be achieved by dehumanizing Palestinians or by demonizing them, nor by crushing the skulls of infants or shedding the blood of children, nor by wiping out Gaza or turning it into hell or reducing its area. It cannot be done by cutting off its water, electricity, and fuel, leaving 2.3 million Palestinians besieged and starved, preventing the entry of their minimum humanitarian relief, medical, and food needs. In the West Bank, including Jerusalem, our people are also facing widespread and dangerous attacks by the Israeli occupying forces, who press on the aim of seizing the land and wealth of our people. We therefore reiterate our calls to the international community and all international organizations to stop the settlement and the silent annexation practices, to stop the daily practices of ethnic cleansing, racial discrimination in all of the occupied Palestinian territory. We call on them to stop the attacks on our people in Jerusalem, Christians and Muslims, to stop the attacks on the holy sites, to prevent incursions into the sacred Al-Aqsa Mosque, as well as the attempts to alter the legal and historical status quo in the holy city. We call on them to stop the invasions of cities, extrajudicial executions, arbitrary detentions, assaults on prisoners, withholding the bodies of martyrs, and stealing the money and resources of the Palestinian people. We call on them to stop the crimes of terrorist settler militias supported by the occupying army, as well as other systematic and widespread crimes, to stop arming thousands of terrorist colonial settlers, enabling their continued terrorism and attacks on our people in Jerusalem and the rest of the West Bank. Ladies and gentlemen, the main cause of the dangerous escalation in the region is the absence and neglect of rights. As such, the world cannot stand by and watch what Israel is committing in the form of every kind of killing and destruction, arrest and displacement against the Palestinian people. The world must not tolerate its crimes and fail to hold it accountable. It must seek a comprehensive solution that addresses the root causes of this occupation and its existence on the territory of the State of Palestine. Ending the occupation and realizing the rights of the Palestinian people is the only way to maintain regional and international stability, peace, and security. What is required urgently now is an immediate halt of the Israeli aggression, the cessation of fire against our people in the Gaza Strip, as well as urgent efforts to secure the entry of humanitarian aid and to reject and prevent the forced displacement of our people, as well as to provide urgent international protection for the Palestinian people, to realize justice through accountability, in addition to refusal of division of the Gaza Strip or reduction of its area or the redeployment of the occupying soldiers inside the Gaza Strip. It is also crucial to take strategic steps to address the strategic threat to the two-state solution, to take practical steps to address the root cause of the problem and the reasons behind the absence of security and instability in the Middle East. It is crucial to take practical steps to end the Israeli colonial occupation of the territory of the State of Palestine, with Jerusalem as its capital, in accordance with United Nations resolutions, the terms of reference of the peace process and international law, the realization of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, at the forefront of which is the right to self-determination, national independence, return of Palestine refugees to their homes from which they were displaced, in implementation of General Assembly Resolution 194. We have warned over the past 75 years that ignoring the rights of the Palestinian people and their suffering, ignoring international law, and failing to take steps to hold Israel accountable, treating it as a state above all international norms and laws, justifying its crimes under various pretexts, have contributed to prolonging Israeli colonialism and allowed Israel to take humanity hostage to its brutality, which undermines the international multilateral law-based system. Some have gone so far as to be complicit in the crime of genocide, the crimes of the occupation and its terrorism, granting it immunity from accountability and punishment, as well as giving an absolute authorization to kill and unleash aggression against our people, supplying them with weapons, encouraging them in the recent war on Gaza, even sending military reinforcements to engage directly in hostilities against our people, rejecting the calls for a ceasefire in a direct justification for murder. The war of genocide carried out by the Israeli occupying war machine is not self-defense, and here we must remind you that whoever commits the crime of aggression and occupation of the land of others, those cannot claim the right to self-defense. Nothing can justify the killing of innocent civilians and children, the targeting of civilian objects, including hospitals, schools, United Nations shelters and facilities, nor can justify the use of starvation as a weapon of war, cutting off water and medical supplies from innocent civilians. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Palestine Liberation Organization, the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, has led the Palestinian national struggle in order to realize the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people. The PLO has rejected schemes to liquidate the Palestinian cause and rejected piecemeal solutions. It has preserved the independent national decision and the absolute sovereignty of the Palestinian people over their territory. It stressed that there is no state alone in Gaza and no state without Gaza, and that Gaza, like Jerusalem and the rest of the West Bank, is an essential and indivisible part of the state of Palestine. We will preserve the rights of our people, confront the aggression and occupation, resist it through political and legal means, as well as through peaceful popular resistance. Our people will not submit to colonialism and apartheid. A people like ours who are steadfast, supported and armed with unparalleled international solidarity will not accept apartheid, Bantustans, ethnic cleansing, siege and hatred. They will not accept the dismissal of their rights. The time has come to achieve the international community's vision for stability and peace in the region, which is based on ending the occupation of the territory of the State of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital. Based on the resolutions of international legitimacy of this organization, the terms of reference and foundations for the solution based on clear implementation mechanisms within a defined time frame, including as stated in Security Council Resolution 2334 of 2016. States and third parties must assume their responsibilities by not recognizing illegal acts and not granting them any form of support by ensuring respect for international law. They must provide international protection for our defenseless people and enable them to exercise their right to self-determination and gain their freedom and independence on their territory, as well as achieve a just and comprehensive peace in the region. In this regard, we urge that the State of Palestine be enabled to obtain its full membership in the United Nations by a Security Council resolution as a first step, and that states that wish to preserve the two-state solution recognize the State of Palestine now. They must support peace, reject aggression and war, while maintaining this hope. Ladies and gentlemen, we are convinced now more than ever that the time has come to hold an international peace conference and uphold the international will. The time has come to reject Israel's intransigence in opposing the vision and recognition of the right of the Palestinian people to exist and to self-determination. We are ready to work with the international community to achieve this immediately. The current aggression against our Palestinian people must also stop immediately. We must engage in a genuine political process that adheres to international legitimacy and aims to end the occupation, a process that defines a package of guarantees to implement what is agreed upon within a specific period of time, to achieve a just and comprehensive peace that leads to the Palestinian people's liberation, their freedom and independence in the State of Palestine, with Jerusalem as its capital, and the right of refugees to return to their homes from which they were displaced in accordance with the Resolution 194 and the implementation of the Arab Peace Initiative. The current Israeli aggression places us at a crossroad in which either the international will prevails or the occupation's will to perpetuate its colonialism and its vision of an unstable and fiery Middle East with settlement policies and settler terrorism, incursions in the city of Jerusalem, and violations of sanctities that will transform the conflict from a political conflict into a religious war that will have dire consequences. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, we will spare no effort to protect our people and search for all means to avoid the scourge of war, killing and destruction, and to preserve the unity of our people and the unity of their destiny in their homeland, Palestine, so that our people exercise their fundamental rights and their highest right of all, the right to life. We express our commitments to international law and institutions of international justice, as well as their duties to preserve accountability and prosecution of the crimes of the occupation that violate international law and international humanitarian law, as a basis for bringing peace and justice to the victims of the Palestinian people, as well as Israel's obligations as an occupying power to assume its responsibilities for all it has destroyed and to make reparation for its crimes in Gaza and the West Bank, including Jerusalem. Excellencies, dear friends, Palestine was and still is the true test of the effectiveness and sustainability of the international law-based system. No amount of false claims or voices that equate the victim with the executioner, the occupier and the occupied can thwart this truth. The failure to engage or ignore the root causes from which the Palestinian question was born is a failure of the system and its longevity. This is proven not least by the peoples and the free voices of solidarity who have come out in the millions in the world's capitals to stand with the Palestinian rights, and the legendary steadfastness of our people, and to stand in respect of the principles of international law and the necessity of applying them without double standards or selectivity. Our Palestinian people, along with all those in solidarity with them across the world, will not accept oppression and injustice, will not accept anything less than to live in freedom and dignity in a free and gracious homeland. They have the right to defend themselves, their existence and their national rights. Allow me to say that all of you have the obligation to help the Palestinian people to achieve their freedom and independence, to live in peace and security, just like the rest of the peoples of the world. There is no force on earth that will prevent them from achieving this goal. Finally, I wish to salute the resilience of our Palestinian people in Palestine and in the refugee camps, the diaspora, and to salute with pride our brave martyrs, prisoners, and wounded people, and tell them all, our one goal is to end the occupation and achieve freedom and independence. Again, I affirm the occupation will end and the Palestinian right will prevail. Sooner or later, peace be upon you all.
Thank you, Excellency. May I request you to convey our sincere gratitude and appreciation to His Excellency Mr. Mahmoud Abbas, President of the State of Palestine, for his particularly important message. We are now concluding the first part of our meeting. I would like to thank His Excellency, the President of the General Assembly, His Excellency, the President of the Security Council, and the Deputy Secretary General for their statements and expression of solidarity with the Palestinian people. We will now have a short break to allow the distinguished guests to leave the room. Thank you.